Hi, I'm Erica Burten, and welcome to Family Matters, where legal insight meets real life. Hi, I'm Erica Burten, and I'm here today on my first podcast for Family Matters, and I'm joined by Charlotte Ejderberg. She's a co-parenting specialist and a mental health professional involved in the legal genre of divorce. Thank you for coming today, Charlotte. It's nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your first podcast.
I'm so happy that you're here. As a mental health professional and a parenting coordinator, coach, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Sure. So I've been doing this for a long time. I'm originally from Sweden, but lived here in the US for a majority of my adult life. And I'm also divorced myself. So I've always been interested in helping my clients get through tough transitions. And when I went through my divorce, that really lit a fire for me to dive deeper into helping families in transition. I felt that there wasn't enough tools and resources out there for me with the co-parenting piece of the divorce.
It's hard
Yeah, it's really hard.
and it's different. It's so different from being an intact family to going into a co-parenting relationship and what that's going to look like.
Exactly. Yeah, you're doing it for the first time for most people, and you don't know. There's no script to follow. And I feel still today that a lot of people, when I tell them what I do, they don't know that this is a resource that's out there. So I'm a co-parenting specialist. It's something that I really love doing and helping families in this time during the divorce. And I thought when I was going through it, I will take my professional experience and marry it with my own personal journey and really built this concept for myself at that time that I went out and did coaching versus therapy, and got involved in collaborative divorce mediation process and just coaching parents on the side of outside of the divorce process as well.
One of the things that we have discussed in the past, and you and I are both familiar with, is co-parenting and what it means to co-parent. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what it means to co-parent and what the differences are between co-parenting and parallel parenting?
Okay, good question. So co-parenting is the ideal way to parent after divorce. That means that you're parenting from two separate homes, but you share a set of values, rules for the children, and goals for the children. So, meaning bedtime is the same at mom's or dad's house. Most of the routines are the same. If they have chores at one home, they may have chores at the other home. Versus parallel parenting, where the parents often can't communicate, they can't agree. So the best thing to do is for them to parent however they choose to parent in their own homes. There's little communication between the two homes. Ideally, the trust is there that each parent will parent the children safely and that their needs will be met, but it will be done differently.
And you have children yourself.
I do. So I have 3 daughters.
Okay.
And my goal was really, what can I do to help these small individuals stay as whole through this process that was very tumultuous in my case?
And how old were they at the time that you went through your process?
They were little. So they were 8, 12, and 14.
That is young. So it must have been very challenging.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
And what do you think that you have taken from that experience that has been most helpful as a co-parenting coach and as a specialist in the process?
Yeah. I think that being able to sit on both sides of that table, knowing what it's like logistically, having the tools to get through it, but also know what it takes to actually make it happen. One thing is to know and suggest versus having lived it and know what actually works in practice.
Okay. And do you ever suggest using a parenting app for those parents either co-parenting or parallel parenting?
Yeah, I suggest apps in both situations. I think apps are great, even in the best of circumstances where people have an easy way of communicating, because the apps are also a place where you can keep expenses, you can keep schedules, and you keep the communication very clear, and everyone is on the same page with the help of the app.
Is there one particular app that you like over another one?
I do have a favorite, but there's also that's a paid version that I think works great. It's our Family Wizard that works great, especially when it's high conflict, because they have something that is a tonometer, I think it's called,
Okay.
where when you're communicating, the app will pick up on the tone of the message and ask you, is this really what you want to say? Is this how you want to say it? Which can be very beneficial when you have high conflict situations.
That's wonderful.
So it will really tone things down.
I think that's great. I didn't know that it had that feature to it. I know about different parenting apps, but I didn't realize that it had that kind of AI intelligence
Yeah.
with it. That's wonderful. Okay. And speaking of those high conflict situations, and ideally that's not what happens with parents, but you yourself and I too am, somebody who's gone through the process of divorce. And y- will you share a little bit about what you have learned through your process of divorce with regards to co-parenting and parenting?
Yeah. So in my case, there was no co-parenting, even if that's how we set it out to be. And very quickly that fell apart. Um, so I learned from my experience that it still only takes one parent. If one parent shows up and is there for the children, the children will develop and feel safe and feel loved. They will do well. Because a lot of the time, we have the best of intentions and we have aspirations and we think it's going to look one way, but it doesn't always. And sometimes it works well, but circumstances has it that one parent has to move out of state and there will be less and less time spent with one parent, and that parent might just sort of drop off, sadly. Um, but knowing that all it takes is one parent to be solid and be there for the children. I also learned that when you're newly divorced and you've been through a difficult divorce, especially, that feelings are raw and we tend to be more reactive to situations. I wish that someone would have been there for me to say, listen, it's not necessarily about you. The way that your ex partner is communicating has a lot to do maybe with what they're going through, their way of coping or not coping at all. So it comes back to these three pillars I have when it about parenting and communicating businesslike and keeping it simple, and keeping emotion out of it. That it just doesn't mean that they're out to get you.
So, what do you think are 3 points that you would say are really important when you're going through the process and to add to a parenting plan or to, I guess, integrate as a parent in your own mindset going through the process when you're trying to deal with not only getting a divorce, but then in the interests of your children and how you deal with your spouse or their father on the other side or their mother on the other side?
Yeah, great question. Uh, the first thing, which I'm very passionate about, and my clients will hear me repeat this over and over again, it's to never put the children in the middle, to always keep the children in the center, meaning that they are the focus, not putting them in the middle where they are becoming the messenger, where they get to hear what your feelings and thoughts are about their other parent. So just keep it very clean, focus on the children. When you're making decisions, think about the children. Is this the best? Is this in the best interest of the child? Or is this about me and my needs and wants? Or is it about not allowing the X to have X, Y, and Z? So try to decipher what is what. So that is one. Another one is keeping communication more business-like. So once you divorce, you're really in the business of co-parenting. You're not a unit as a couple anymore. So keep it clean. Try to keep the conversations short. respectful, and stick to facts, not to add so much emotion into the communication or no emotion at all. Just communicate what is necessary. And then the third is really setting boundaries, but yet being able to be flexible. So when you create a parenting plan, and we can talk more about that specifically, but being able to be flexible with each other because things happen, things are going to change, and try to be understanding and not read into it so much that if your ex is asking for a change or maybe switching weekends, that it's maybe because they need to, and it's not out to get you. Because it's easy, especially in the beginning when feelings are raw, that you're like, this is just inconvenient to me, and he or she is doing that to get to me. That may not be the case at all.
So it's interesting. You said a few things, and you said keep it child centric,
Yeah.
but don't put them in the middle.
Yeah.
Which is a very difficult concept for some people to understand on how to be so focused on what the children really need and keeping your own personal needs out of that, along with switching on the weekends.
Yeah.
And not necessarily reading into it, which I think as an attorney, all of my clients always are, when they're in the process, they're so concerned about the implications and what's this going to look like and how is this going to affect my case. And some of it is really, it's not going to matter at all.
Yeah.
And they're so afraid to do anything that would jeopardize anything of their process, that not being, I guess, neutral in the thought process versus positive or negative and reading into it one way or the other is really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So another thing that you mentioned, which I think is an important component, is how the children are responding and their needs and how you need to be flexible. Because I'm sure you see this all the time, even if you have a parenting plan that you've helped create for these people, children's needs change.
Yeah.
How do you recommend people approach those changes as time goes on? Because it's inevitable.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I work with parents on a parenting plan, I always try to explain that it's a living and growing document in a way that we try to account for steps and changes, and that it will most likely be needed to make those changes along the lines unless you have a very stage by stage parenting plan. Um, because people's needs change and things happen that you can't predict. Like there could be job loss, someone has to relocate. Children might have to change schools. So all of that is something that is worth talking about before you put the parenting plan together, to prepare both parties that this is something that you may want to be open to have that flexibility. But then on the flip side, having enough details as a fallback. So when I have couples that are very agreeable and they say, we're going to be flexible, we work with each other. But I think both you and I know that that's not always the case, that people are able to keep it that way.
Right. It's the aspiration, right? It's the hope that they can be positive, that they can work together.
Yep.
But then there is inevitably something that happens
Yeah.
where they're not okay with it.
Yeah.
Like the introduction of a significant other.
Yeah.
Which is always, I think, the unsaid issue that people are afraid to address moving forward.
Yeah.
And hopefully people are able to integrate that into their parenting plan. But how do you deal with that in terms of the social emotional component when you're dealing with parents that this is going to happen? How do you broach that in a parenting plan?
Yeah. I mean, I always mention it. We talk about it. And again, aspirational. They may be agreeable that will be fine. Some may be straight up not agreeable. There's not going to be any dating, and trying to add that into the plan, which, this cannot,
It's not going to
it's not going to happen. No. So having the conversation, but that's what I mean. That's why I like to have more details, even if they think we're not going to need them, because when the conflict occurs, they can look back. There's a fallback plan. It's kind of, I call it like the bumpers when you go duck pin bowling that you can put on
Yeah.
those bumpers. It's like, okay, you may be good at bowling, but there may come a day when you need those bumpers. So that's my approach to,
How did you handle that?
yeah,
And what about when that's already an issue in the divorce, which is very likely, right? When we deal with all different kinds of circumstances.
sure.
What about when the significant other is already in place before the divorce has gone through?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that when one parent says, I don't want this person around my children?
Right.
I don't want them spending time with my child. I don't want them parenting my child. How do you deal with that? Because that's a really hard conversation to have with both sides.
It is. And I often end up taking one parent aside and speaking to both parents separately, because when we have those conversations, they end up being very toxic most of the time. They're rarely are they productive at the table. So I like to speak to both parties. I think my therapy background comes in very handy in that, where we talk through, explain, paint scenarios. And it's hard. Like, people are resistant. It's their children. So, of course, they're protective. But it's helping both parties understand what it means to move forward and what reality looks like. I think being able to be realistic, but also do so with a lot of compassion and empathy, and for my clients to hear that from me is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and you offer that, whereas a lot of divorces that aren't involving the collaborative process or mediation, where they think to have those resources, that attorneys would utilize you to help the parties process that. Because if you don't know about it and they don't know that you have this coaching ability and this co parenting skill set to help parties deal with these realistic issues, you're likely to end up in court and have this go on. And the judge just eventually say, I'm really sorry you don't feel okay with that, but we're not going to order that the other person not have a relationship with somebody else. They have no control over it.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so great when we work together, that I can have that conversation, and then I can ask you to have the conversation from the legal standpoint, where you will come in and you explain to them that why it's not beneficial to go to court.
Right.
That's something that you do very well, and I can take the emotional piece.
And I think that having those resources, such as yourself, available to my clients differentiates me as a practitioner and also helps my clients, because I am not a mental health professional as much as I'm a counselor. That is not my specialty by any stretch of the imagination. I know you had mentioned previously, and we've spoken about it with regards to what could help children transition from to a two-parent home, or yeah, to two homes of each parent.
Yeah.
So a two-home situation, how to help the children with that transition, going from moms to dads after being in an intact family.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, the best thing you can do as a parent is to be enthusiastic for your child, even if you don't feel enthusiastic about dropping them off with the other parent for their shared parenting time. But encourage them. Say, I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to hear what you did when you were with mom or with dad, so that the children feel that they have permission to have fun, to share, to be able to come back if they've had a great time, that they can share that, instead of feeling like mom is or dad is going to be sad that I had a great time with my other parent. So encourage them, let them share their stories, bite your tongue. Don't share how you feel about the other parent. And let them be kids and let them love their other parent.
That's a great message. It is hard, I think,
Yeah.
because as the parent that you're no longer having the children at home with you, that they're going to choose the other parent over you. And then also recognizing that they have two parents that they should love and have a good time with,
Yeah.
even if the two of you don't get along.
Yeah, exactly.
On another subject matter, something I see a lot and people ask me a lot is, do you represent more men or more women? And, you know, something in our area, in this vicinity, is often the roles that different parties play. Um, living in Fairfield County, oftentimes there is a stay-at-home parent, or one parent who takes up more of the parenting responsibilities and the other parent who takes on maybe more of the financial components. With that in mind, the role shift and the paradigm shift of the couple as parents, I have always found very interesting that oftentimes the parent who isn't the primary caretaker all of a sudden wants to now take on a much more significant role in the child's life.
Yeah.
They want the 50-50 parenting time. I know how I deal with it as a practitioner, as a lawyer, but how do you deal with that as a co-parenting coach or as a parenting coach to help explain to the other party or both parties what that is going to look like now in the new normal?
Yeah. I think this, just to come back to the parenting plan a little bit, because I will hear pushback if the one parent who hasn't been as involved is now stepping in. And first of all, you need to make sure that it's realistic. That will it work with schedules?
That's huge.
Yeah.
Because the aspiration is great, but
Yeah.
practicality is completely different.
And if it doesn't work, well, then we're starting from scratch again. So, but if that's in place and there's still pushback from the other parent, what I have seen a lot of the time is that the parents that's now stepping up and stepping in is able to do it. They just haven't had to do it before. There's been a different dynamic. So it doesn't mean that that parent can't. It's just that they haven't done it.
And what about the other parent who now is not in control?
Yeah, which is hard to let go.
And how do you help them with that?
Well, one thing that I think is great in the process, and I'll come back to how I can help them with that, is that what I often do in a divorce process, and especially if it seems like it's something that will take a little time to sort out finances and all the other pieces, is that I put in a temporary parenting plan. It's more like a rough draft,
Right.
where we address certain issues that they mentioned. And let's say in this case that one parent is stepping in, stepping up. Well, let's try it during this time. So as long as it's a healthy plan that is beneficial for the children, that it's not going to stir too much, but it's sort of a practice run. And if it really doesn't work, but it gives everyone time to get used to new routines without it being set, let the ink dry, if you will.
Right.
And for the parent that is reluctant, it doesn't feel as definite for them. They feel like it's a practice run. And meanwhile, the intention is that this is what it's going to be.
Right. And to ever ease them into the plan, like
Yes.
gradual,
Yes.
step by step.
Yeah.
And do you find that that's a little more digestible?
Most of the time, or ideally it is.
Okay.
Every situation is so different.
And how did the children respond in those circumstances? Do you find from your experience and from the feedback of parents that the children are better adjusted when you go gradual, or if it's an immediate change?
Depends a lot on the age. Gradual, I think, is easiest for everyone.
Okay.
I also find that the children are more resilient and more adaptable than the parents to the plan. If the parents are supportive of it, the children will do great.
And wrapping this up, my last question, what's the one thing I did not ask you about that I should have?
I think for co-parents, how do they take care of themselves? What do they do for themselves? I think it's so important when you're co-parenting that you make sure that you take care of yourself so you can be there for your children, so you can show up and be all that, because a lot of the time it's just you. Ideally, you have another co-parent to share responsibilities with, but that's also something that doesn't always happen. I happen to know a lot about that. So then when responsibility falls solely on you, you need to fill your own cup. So even if it's going for walks, making sure you take the time to maybe journal, go to therapy, whatever it is that you need to do to be able to show up for your children, you need to make sure you do it.
I just want to say thank you so much for being here today, Charlotte. Your information was amazing, and you have so much to offer. And I really suggest that anybody going through the process have somebody like you in their corner to help them process what they're going to be dealing with as a parent, as a co-parent, and somebody just dealing with the divorce process as a whole, because it's a lot to process. And even for somebody who has expertise, as I'm sure you can speak to the same thing, you are just in a different state of mind when you are going through the process, no matter how much you have available to you. Thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful talking with you.
Yeah,
And hopefully we can get to do this again.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today, everyone. This is really exciting to have you as part of this process of my first podcast. We look forward to seeing you again and joining with many other specialists and interesting conversations that are going to be happening here. Follow Family Matters with Erica Burten on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and join me for conversations that help you navigate this transition with clarity and compassion.